Hello folks, welcome, and sorry for the delay there. I had to reconnect a bunch of stuff because Streamlabs is being poop. Just turn that compressor ratio down. It's looking a little bit harsh on the old audio thing. So today we've got two sort of science fiction themed games. I don't know much about M.O.B.O, haven't checked it out before. I do know about Department of Gravity Management because we have checked that out before. And I started making this little preview panel. It doesn't update where I did it on the other screen, so I'm going to just delete that for now because it's too hard to kind of keep it relevant to what we're doing. So yeah, we're going to check out M.O.B.O first because we haven't checked it out before. And then we'll go to Gravity Management afterwards. Department of Gravity Management, I think I've played twice on the stream now. One of our patrons games, both patrons games today. And I think this is in an interesting place because the developer has sort of like been iterating through loads of versions of what this game could be. And I think they're starting to settle on like the broader shape of the game, which is interesting. So the developer of that said, it's going to be exploration puzzle focused, sort of like puzzle Metroidvania, like, you know, a Portal type game, but with a bit of non-linearity and kind of exploring the station at your own pace, kind of like you're doing something like Prey. So that's kind of cool. I like that idea, and it's just a good example of when you're making one of these bigger projects that's not intended to just be like an hour-long little game, and you're making something a bit bigger. You do sometimes have to just go back and forth of like working out what the identity of the thing you're making is, because sometimes that's a conversation with it's a conversation with the game you're making and with yourself. And I know that can sound a bit arty-farty for sort of more technical people that want there to be a correct answer to things, but you know, you learn what you're making by making it. And if you're very far into your career, you can have an idea and just execute the idea, and it is reasonably close to what was in your head. But for most people, whether it's musicians or filmmakers or whatever, the thing that you end up making is always different from what's in your head. And as you get more skilled at executing your ideas, the gap between the idea and the execution gets smaller, but it never completely gets rid of that need to experiment and try things out. So, you know, as you make stuff, as you prototype stuff, you're having a kind of, you're learning yourself what you're capable of and what you're good and bad at executing. And that's why taste is so important, because if you sit there and you make two versions of a game and you have no like internal criteria for which one of those is better, you're going to have a problem, right? You can't depend entirely on outside feedback to decide which direction to go in, and outside feedback is very helpful for like the stuff that you're personally a bit blind to. If there's something you don't really pay attention to in games, a very common one that has come up a few times with people I've been mentoring has been like music and sound, because I meet lots of technical people who don't play games with the sound on or turn the music off, and then they don't understand how to incorporate that into games because they don't have any experience of it. So that's like an example of where you might have to like slightly tweak your own tastes just as a kind of learning exercise and say, well, for the next few months while I'm working on my game, I'm going to play games with the sound on so I can understand and appreciate how that works, and not just approach it from the like my personal taste perspective. But if your taste is reasonably broad and you've got lots of games to compare to, then you've always got your own internal like metrics for what's good and what's not. So, you know, you're always going to have this period where you're experimenting and trying different stuff. And the only time you don't really need to do that is if you're cloning something, right? If you're making an exact clone of something where all you're doing is recreating game X, but you're making it like cowboys instead of vampires, then you might be able to work in that kind of waterfall style where you plan the whole game out and then make it. But most of the time we can't do that. And that's because the things that are interesting about a game kind of emerge as you're doing it through playtesting, right? And like even the game that I'm currently working on Golem Gourmet, there's stuff that I was excited about in the idea of the game from the start, right? And that's still what the game is about. I was excited about combining certain types of systems and mechanics together and making something that was like a love letter to certain games that I liked, but did it in a totally different way, right? Like I like building things in a very non-fiddly way. Like I don't want to do Terraria, like building loads of little fiddly blocks. I just want to like make big chunky decisions about this goes here and this goes here. I like the idea of doing that. I love kind of run-based, skill-based action roguelikes like Spelunky and Noita, but I sometimes wish that they were games where I could do a run in 10 minutes rather than an hour, because like the stress that comes from that like build up of like all of your loot and your abilities and stuff over an hour is very exhilarating when you're good at it. If you don't get to play the game very often, it's very frustrating. So I feel like a lot of the time good game design is just having being very self-aware about what you like and don't like about games, so that when you make your own games you can actually have a design problem. Because like I'm making game X because I want to make a game and I want to sell games is not a design problem. That's like a personal problem, right? You have to be kind of fixing a perceived issue. Like, oh, this type of game over here is great, but it'd be great if they did one with a different theme or a different art style, or where this part of the game was less important and this part of the game was more important. Those are kind of design problems. And being guided by your own taste and what you like and don't like in games, obviously it has limitations, like the thing I said about, you know, never listening to the music in games. That's an example of where someone's taste is like limiting them and making it hard for them to make good creative decisions. But a lot of the time, if you like, you know, if you have a reasonably broad taste in games and you like 3 or 4 different types of games and you can see the design patterns and how they work, and you know what this type of crafting system does versus this type of crafting system, or all of those things, then you can guide your own designs. If you're totally dependent on other people to tell you whether or not something's good, then you've got a problem, and you either need to develop your taste or accept that, you know, your role within making games should be following someone else's instructions rather than making your own thing, you know. And there's no shame in that. It's totally fine to be that sort of person as well. But I think as soon as you start going down this route of like, I'm going to make something all on my own because I don't want to work with anyone else, then you need to take responsibility for all of the parts of the game. So I kind of like seeing projects like Department of Gravity Management, where the developer's been working on it for a little while and they've made these big pivots in what the game is. Because what the devs done, Non-Newtonian Games has done with this game, is they've developed like a visual language, right, for these kind of quite harsh looking blue and red blocks and everything. The game has quite a strong visual identity. There's parts of it I don't love, like this graphic design and the way that text is done in this game doesn't look great. But I think generally speaking, there's a very strong visual identity here that is like somewhere in between something like Portal and something more surreal like Cruelty Squad. And I really like it. It's got something that grabs you here. And then they've built this set of toys with which to build puzzles. And then over time, they've kind of rearranged them into different formats to work out what sort of game they're making. And I think that's a very sensible way to make any game that is reliant on having lots of content, right? Like an action game, a puzzle game, a game that requires you to build environments. You do need to sort of just play around and go, okay, what sort of game is this? Whereas if you start with the bigger format of like, I'm making a Metroidvania or I'm making a deck builder, then you don't have that wiggle room that allows you to like pivot the game around what's actually most interesting about these little interactions you're doing, right? And if it's a puzzle game or an action game or something where you're, you know, physically interacting with things in an environment, those physical interactions do need to be the star of the game and they need to feel good. And so it makes sense to build those first, kind of create a toy box of things to interact with, play around with it for a while, and then work out what the game is from that. Those of you who follow Blogis, one of my favorite game dev YouTubers, Blogis, made Bloodthief, and the process there was very much the same. It was like, why am I getting ads? I don't get ads. Don't you know who I am? I've got premium. Like Bloodthief was the same sort of thing, you know, like they developed the core mechanics and like the basic enemies and just played around with it loads to work out what sort of game they wanted to make. And then from that you get your design pillars of like, I want it to be fast, I want it to feel this way, and then all of the content design comes out of that when it comes to making levels and stuff. So I know that there's a kind of a school of thought that is just make really small games as quickly as possible, which is very important for learning. But I think when it comes to like shipping stuff and making cool stuff that other people are going to care about, then the sort of process that this has been through, Department of Gravity Management, it's quite similar to Bloodthief in some ways. Like the game isn't actually similar, but that process of like, we're going to make the core interactions of what the player does, we're going to make the toys, like all of the kind of elements that make up the kind of situations that we're going to put the player in to test their skills, whether those skills are like fighting or puzzle solving. We're going to make all of these components, and then from that, we'll see how we make a game. And if you go back to like the early 2000s, before we had things like Unity and Unreal, and you look at how game studios work, and you look at how like the relationship between programming and content design worked in those studios, it was very much the same, right? So that anyone who's used like the editor for Half-Life or the editor for Warcraft will have seen this, where it's like, we have an editor, it is a database of stuff, we've got a bunch of art, we've got a bunch of enemies in there, they're all pre-programmed to behave a certain way, and yeah, we can tweak that code and it will change across the whole game. But once we get to the point where we're actually making the content and deciding like, what's the adventure we're sending the player on, what are the situations we're putting them in, the problems that we're trying to get them to solve, at that point you kind of already want to have all of those bits of the toolkit or the toy box put together. And I think another good example here is if we look at Horticulture. Yeah, I think you have to make small projects to learn, but I don't think learning projects are projects for sale, you know? Like, one of the reasons I don't really call myself an indie developer is like, I've finished, well, I've got lots of game projects on my old itch page. I got to a stage where I think I'm done with that, I'm finished with it, but I never like thought, oh, that's worth charging people money for, because it was usually a subsystem within a larger game. It wasn't a game, right? I wasn't developing a game. I was learning game development by making a small thing in a game engine, and that was a prototype or a toy or something. It wasn't a game. And I think kind of working out how you define those things is really helpful, because make small games, very important for learning, and making games that are constrained around what you're personally good at, very important for making larger commercial projects, right? Whether it's like, oh, I'm an artist and animator, so I'm going to focus on games that allow me to do that. Or, you know, you might be someone who has a strong background in UX and interface design. So it makes sense for you to make games that capitalize on that, right? So make small games is often more just like, make games where the constraints of the project fit around what you're good at and what comes easy to you, and not what's not easy to you, right? You might still always have to like stretch your legs a bit and try new stuff, but you know, I think as soon as you get to the point of like trying to make larger games or trying to make games that are doing something different, you do have to give yourself leeway to experiment, and a lot of people don't like that because it's risky, but you don't do great things without taking some sort of risk. The reason I brought Horticulture up again, because we played this last week, is Jenna, I'm not typing stuff out into chat. There's too many people here for me to be like individually responding to one person in chat. I'm afraid. Sorry about that. Horticulture is in a similar position where the devs have been working on it for a year, and I played it a few times and thought, this is cool. I like the aesthetic. I like the way that we interact with this. There's a fun set of ideas here. But the last time I played this last week was the first time it's really felt like a game, because they've spent all of that time getting the core stuff you do ready. And now they're starting to shape it into a series of scenarios where you need to actually solve a problem, right? Whereas the previous times I played it, it was just a kind of sandbox mode, which you need to develop, right? You need to like develop a kind of playground to just test out what's the main thing we're doing in the game. And then you start to turn it into a game, because it's not a game before that point, because it doesn't have goals, right? So Horticulture, that was a really nice turning point for that last week. And Department of Gravity Management, I feel, from what I get about the project context, is this has just sort of started to turn that corner, where it's gone from like a bunch of ideas in a test playground into something that's a lot more kind of structured as a game. So we're going to see that second. But first, we're going to jump over to M.O.B.O. Machinica. I was going to call it Machina then. I don't really know what to expect from this one. I think I've got some notes, but it's the first time we've tried it out. This one is a private playtest. So I think the second game we're going to play, the gravity management one has a open Steam page. This one is still a private one. Just close some of these things that are beeping at me. It says it's launching. It's taking its sweet time. Okay, cool. Nate's in the chat. Nate is the developer of M.O.B.O, so feel free to give feedback as we go. You know, when we do these things, it's mainly I'm thinking out loud about my experience. Sometimes that will be a mix of like things I think the developers should do based on having made games for a long time, but sometimes I'm just sort of like thinking out loud about like the experience of learning to play the game. And when I do that, the purpose isn't for people to go to sort of like hang on my every word and learn from it. The purpose is for you to try and model what I'm doing when you play your own and other people's games, which is to like be very conscious of what the design is or isn't doing for you as you play a game. Like I play my own game quite a lot. I probably spend about half as much time playtesting my game as I do developing it. I'm lucky that I've got someone helping me with developing it, but I think a lot of people, when they play their own game, they're just looking at the most recent thing they implemented and like looking for bugs or something and playing with a very specific reason, i.e. not playing, right? Because when you actually play a game, you play to have fun. When you playtest your own game, you're often not, well, you're not even playtesting, you're doing QA. So again, I just try and play games and kind of model thinking out loud. Because the weird thing that happens when you're a game developer is you can play your own game as a player, but you have to make a conscious effort to do that. And some of that is just like making this kind of role play decision of like, when I play the game, what am I trying to do? And then you sort of prime yourself to play it more like a player, right? Okay. This is a cute little moon. I can click on it and drag around. That's great because I had a desire to click on it and drag it around, and that desire was met. That's implemented, which is cool. I didn't think it was going to be, so I'm pleasantly surprised there. Just turn the audio up. Very quiet. There we go. Interface design, very nice here. Don't know what the game is going to be yet, but this is kind of giving cute. Like a lot of this feels quite cute. I'm seeing kind of cute. I'm getting kind of cute and maybe chaotic from this art style. Like we're going to get some sort of, I don't know, maybe slightly Katamari vibes. Because of the, I guess, the kind of low poly and the way this is all so kind of bright and colourful in the background. Yeah, unfortunately, Facecam lags whenever we have Unreal games. So I'll switch to full screen in a minute. Okay, we're Wasden. We're Wasden. Take your first steps, rotate the camera. Great. Got a little questy thing up here. Little flying guy. Okay, so I can rotate one way with Q. I sort of feel like I should be able to rotate the other way with E, but I can't. Cute little kind of alien cat person. We've got a suit energy. I saw a E, close hatch, open hatch, close hatch. Okay, so E is open and then Q is rotate. Got some nice Footstep sounds. Might not seem important, things like that, but it really depends what sort of game you're making and how much it leans on like immersing someone in the world they're supposed to be in. We're calling over the bots with... Okay, I click the middle mouse thing and they get... Oh, I click on them and it calls them. Okay, cool. You come in with me, and then if I click on you, do you... I don't know how well that visual effect is coming across on the stream, but it's very cool. There's like a sort of weird heat haze thing when you click. Which is cool, because it's like, you can see there's this sort of... There's like a techie field around it, but then it's also got a heat haze in the middle. And it kind of looks sort of technological, but also like it could be some sort of psychic thing. I think one of the benefits we get from making games with magic or sci-fi settings is like whatever you have as your technology or magic in your world can be the interface of the game as well, right? Oh, great. So we're going to pick up bots and like throw them at things. So I can double click on stuff and the bots will run at it. I've got a view change. Although I don't seem to be able to do anything from that view. Looks cool though. Okay. Call the bots back. This is good, right? So depending on what sort of game you're making, it can be really helpful to have this kind of system in place early on. Because one of the things you'll notice is, right, this thing up in the top right is like a, it's a quest system, right? We could use this all the way through the game to tell the player what they need to do next, but we can also use it as a tutorial. And it's one of the least intrusive ways of doing a tutorial. And by developing a little system like this, you've got something you can use all the way through the game, rather than spending loads of time prematurely building a tutorial for a game that you don't really know how to teach yet, right? So if your game has some sort of quest system of like, do this 3 times, blah, 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 that's often the best way to do your early tutorial, because you can implement it, and then even if the tutorial needs to change a lot, that's not super difficult to change. And it also means you've now got a quest system you can use all the way through the game, rather than this thing that this bespoke thing that you've had to spend lots of time on just at the beginning. So I really like these kind of little quest systems. It's a very kind of quick way of making sure you can teach the game without, you know... One of the things I really dislike seeing is when someone's not been working on a game for very long, or they haven't built much of their game, and their tutorial is like the intro to a AAA game, and the tutorial is all like story, has characters speaking to you and stuff, and I just think this is not a good use of your time, like until you're like way deeper into development. Much better to just, you know, give me stuff to do with a little checklist like this. Okay, we've got to find the landing pod. So I can see some little things on my map. The yellow one is our base. There's a pink one over here. Is that the landing pod? Hello, landing pod. Am I supposed to do something to you? Break open the pod. Okay. That's cute. Yeah, it's good onboarding, right? It gets us immediately to doing the things, so we understand what the game is, rather than telling us what the things are. Like, often you don't need to give people too much context. You just need to go, you know, press this to do this, and then make sure that you get a few chances to do that. So, for example, the middle click to call the bots has actually been tutorialized multiple times. There's been 2 times so far when I've been told to use that action, right? Which is good. You want to repeat stuff, you want to repeat it in different contexts, and it's a lot easier to do that if you're just doing it with these little 1 instruction, or, you know, hopefully at some point this is going to diversify and we'll get a list of 2 or 3 things once we're like familiar with the basic controls. And then when we've got that list of 2 or 3 things, then we'll start to feel some agency about being able to choose what order to do things in. And then we'll kind of gradually build up the player's confidence to be able to sort of understand the game and make their own decisions. Yeah, Necro said, so I'm just going to copy what I'm going to do. We just, because the camera is going to keep lagging out on this game, so I'm just going to bring the chat box over to this screen where it's not usually. Oh no, it's already there, it's just hidden. There we go, just so we can see what's going on in the chat. Necro said they had a problem with like players not understanding the point where they need to think for themselves. Yeah, this is why this eventually needs to like this quest list eventually needs to become I mean if you've ever sort of like if you've ever had kids or dealt with kids, right? Think of there's something called there's probably a technical name for it. I would call it a compound instruction, right? So a compound instruction would be something like, get ready to leave the house, right? And we do this all the time with kids. We give them a compound instruction and they don't understand what it means yet because it's not really age appropriate and it contains... And so when I call it a compound instruction, what I'm saying is that get ready to leave the house is actually a list of several things like squished into one instruction, and it includes like put your shoes on, put a coat on, brush your teeth if you haven't done that. All of those things are squished up in the instruction to get ready to leave the house. And so you have to make sure that someone understands how to do this list of things, and they understand that that list of things is what we mean when we say get ready to leave the house. So your tutorial should eventually be able to give people compound instructions like defeat the boss or like complete the level or something like that. But in order to do that, you need to get people to the point where they understand all of the steps in that process. So if we want to give people an instruction in a quest list that says, you know, build a citadel, then the player needs to have engaged with the building system enough times to have looked through and understand what a citadel is, how building works, how they get the resources and stuff like that. And I think that's just a thing that comes from experience and like understanding how to structure, like what are the things, what are the mini instructions that make up that bigger instruction, you know? Okay, so we've got the ability to build now, and we've got place the reclaimer facility within the buildable area. So we've got this buildable area around here. This is kind of feeling a bit like something like Crashlands or Don't Starve, but I'm not seeing any kind of peril or monsters or anything yet. We've got a reclaimer here. Cute. Grid feels kind of nice. This is a good art style for this because it sort of makes it okay that everything is a little bit abstract. You know, I think if we were going a little bit less cartoony, it might feel a bit silly that we've just got like stuff on a grid and one big rock here. But I think the art style actually suits the like level of fidelity of the game objects very, very well. Build the bot fabricator, which is this one. We're going to get the ability to make more bots. Fabricate 5 additional bots. So, oh, hang on. Where's my bot gone? Where's my fabricate? Oh no, I clicked into it and I think it let me move it, or maybe I didn't put it in the right place. Okay, we got build bot as an action on there that my character can do. But do I not have enough stuff? No, I don't have enough steel. So now this is basically the point where we're getting a compound instruction, right? Because it says fabricate 5 additional bots. So in order to do that, I need to know how to build a bot at the machine, which isn't too hard. I walk up to it and the prompt is there, right? So we don't need anything else to tell us how to build a bot because this tells us how to build a bot. And then when I look down here and I look, okay, I don't have enough for this. So if people get stuck at this point, this is where I would look at, okay, where's the lack of information? This might be a little bit confusing because it's telling us the cost of each thing. But the highlight, I feel like the highlight should really be on the thing we can't afford, right? So I think what I would do, if you wanted to make this step much smoother, would be to like the icon for the thing you can't afford goes red. Like we can afford this cost, we can afford this cost. There's these 3 bits of information all look the same at a glance, right? Because we've got the cost in red. And none of them is like suggesting that it's different from the others, but actually the context is that this one is the one we can't afford. So it might be good to just have that icon go red as well in this situation, and then we can quickly see what we need to get, right? And that might seem a bit like, oh, you're kind of cheating for the player, but it's the sort of thing that's going to happen lots and lots of times as they're playing the game. So if you can make that quicker to recognize, it's going to be easier. Are you going to... they're taking that to the first... I think they're going to take that to the big machine over here and deconstruct it. Is that what that's for? That's cool. Yeah, the bots in this are really endearing. Got some Wally energy going on here. Okay, so is that going to give us enough for our first bot? Let's go check. Yes, we've got... It's time to build a bot. Yeah, I think having the cost underneath would make sense, but I think mainly, you know, something to differentiate which is the thing you can't actually afford would be the most helpful thing, like, ongoing. Okay, our suit's critical, so we need to go back to the base. Do I need to go in the back? Is there a... Why does it say build bot there? I don't want to build a bot. Is that a incorrect prompt? Oh no, okay, the enter is there. I think I found a secret bot builder, or... I think I know what happened is... The first time I thought I was building a bot builder, I built it behind the base, I think. We're going to build a little bed. That's a cool system. Right, so we have a grid, and we can rotate with R. But then also, if we go to the edge, it kind of clips onto the rounding of the edge. That's really neat. Because I think these types of building systems always have this problem of, like, the trade-off of, like, trying to make it functional versus look nice. I think this is a very nice middle ground to have it on a grid or following the circle around the edge. Yeah, Nate, I don't think it's a bug. I think the game just let me build something in a place where it was obscured. So when I had that first thing I was building, I actually put it behind the... Put it behind the base. I mean, one other tiny little UX thing you would have noticed there, it gave me the prompt to press E to sleep when the menu was still open. And I sort of intuitively closed the menu to get the prompt to work, but it wasn't working before I closed the menu and I was pressing E. You've been promoted from a recruit to a cadet. You've unlocked a retro carpet, a retro fridge, and a retro cupboard. This is really cute. So it's sort of like... we're kind of doing a Animal Crossing type investment. It's like The Martian meets Animal Crossing, right? We don't have any little friends to deal with. So... But that's fine because it kind of fits the setting, right? This is a good example of the kind of setting and the fantasy fitting with the scope of the game. The example of that I like to give that I've used a billion times is the way that, you know, Pacific Drive being about cars means that it doesn't need to have most of the features of most survival crafting games because you don't need to build a house, right? Same thing here, like the appeal of this game is kind of Animal Crossing. So then the problem then is like you go, okay, well, what's the unique selling point? It's Animal Crossing, but with no villagers. Well, that's not a good selling point, right? But if you say, well, you know, you're stranded on a planet and you've got these cute little robots who help you, it starts to become a little bit more of a selling point because the lack of loads of NPCs and stuff to meet suddenly becomes something that makes sense in the setting. Let's see if there's anything I can build that I haven't built yet. I can build a scanning tower, but I'm supposed to be building bots, so let's focus on that, I guess. Yeah, so we're building our functional stuff outside, and then furniture pieces that we're sort of like getting as a reward to decorate inside. Go and get that. Is that metal? We'll find out. It would be good if we had a series of steps on this fabricate X bots thing, you know? just to give us a little bit of progression. Yeah, it is kind of... It is Pikmin-esque, yeah. I never played Pikmin. I played Little King's Story, which was sort of like Pikmin Plus. That was one of my favourite Wii games. So yeah, it feels like if you're going to market this as that, or even if you're just trying to appeal to the same thing, then I think Maui's right of like, we're going to expect these robots to eventually go, oh, I've got a yellow one, I've got a pink one. They do different things, you know. I guess Slime Rancher is kind of in that same territory. And Slime Rancher is a good example of a game that is like very cute and kind of trafficking in being cute, but rather than make the cuteness really kind of dependent on like characters who you can speak to, the cute things are a resource. Which is kind of why Slime Rancher works. And it kind of feels like a cutesy cozy game, whereas like a lot of cute cozy games are more about having actual relationships with the characters, which you can't necessarily do unless you want to do a game with loads of writing in. Hats. Close the map. Okay, so up there's a big saucisson in the way. Over here, there's a purple Durple. And this is the Cave of Solitude. Let's go on a little expedition. We're going to go and find a purple Durple, guys. We've been told to build a scan tower, but we didn't get to be the leading cosmonauts on our planet by always following orders. Right, you guys take that back. Okay, so it tells you how many are needed. I see. Where's the rest gone? I thought I had more. Did they die? So I guess scanning towers are going to enlarge our build area, but I might be wrong. It says scan for objectives. I will. I shall scan. Ah, there is a giant trophy in the Cave of Solitude. Let's go. Let's go check it out. Where have my robots gone? Have they broken? Is that a thing that happens? No, they're here. Guys. It's too heavy. It was okay. And they were carrying it. And then I pulled them back and they were like, nuh-uh. We ain't carrying this. We're unionizing. It's unionizing time. For little robot guys. Okay, my suit energy is nearly out. So let's collect one of these. Get it back to base. And then go for a little sleepy recharge. Maurice said something along the lines of, please say saucisson more often. It's time for sleepies. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the Idle game that's in UFO 50 as well. That had some similar vibes. I think like low peril sci-fi building is something that appeals to me quite a bit. Like, I do not need the threat of monsters for a game like this to be good. And sometimes it gets in the way a little bit. And I appreciate I may be alone in that, but, wait. Why is it, this wants to be in very specific places. Let's put it there. Wonderful. And a little, lovely little circular rug. I don't want it exactly in the middle. I want it nice little offset. We're going a little bit 1970s with the decor. Got fridge. Computer. What do I need to build that? Not enough resources. Not enough resources. Okay. All good. Beautiful. Look at my lovely little house. The bots sleep in the sand where they belong. Who cares where on the floor you're pointing? Yeah, that makes sense. Give me a new bot, please. I don't have enough nuts and bolts. Okay. Come on, lads. Some good suggestions around the bots. Yeah, I mean, like, okay, we can't get into there until we've got 10 bots. So let's get all our boys back. Yeah, like little igloo charging stations that they go in, that would be cute. Or something that really accommodates their cubeness. You know, like maybe there's a charging station that fits 4 block bots and it's got these little slots in and they clock into them and then they go, ah, when they recharge. And you can only fit 4 in a station or however many you want to do. And you have to build more and like maintain them and stuff. That would also be a cool vector for doing some of the Pikmin stuff with, because rather than having bots with like permanent identities because they've been upgraded, you could have stations and you charge them in a particular one and then they get a particular buff, you know? Like there's a particular station that's got the modifier to speed them up or to make them stronger or whatever. You know, like stronger would be you are faster when carrying things, and faster would be you are faster when you're not carrying things, those type of things. Yeah, could be very cute to like give them a sort of resting response that they do though. Okay, it says I've got 11 bots, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've definitely got enough to pull that thing, but we're going to get a new guy anyway, because we can. Yeah, that would be cool. Because making things more changeable gets rid of some balancing problems, right? This is why we love roguelikes so much, or love making them so much, is you can use randomness and the fact that runs aren't very long to like reduce the issues that you'd get from a game where having a broken build ruins the game for you, right? So if you're playing an MMO or something and you find a broken build, that might be fun if you're a very competitively driven person, but eventually you're going to optimize the fun out of the game. Whereas having things that are more short-lived, which is kind of what roguelike structurally does for us, it means that the the length of consequences of doing something that's really good or really bad is shorter, right? So you could kind of apply that thinking here to have a way of upgrading bots which is a little bit more kind of temporary, and rather than sort of fully changing them like they're becoming a different subclass of bot, they just kind of get a little software update for a couple of days or something, become that other thing. But yeah, they're very cute. I really like the idea, because they're cubes. I really like the idea of them slotting into things, or like going into a little tower on top of each other, you know? Guys, this is the most important job of your whole time here. We're gonna get the big shiny. It's time. You know what I would love here to add a bit of life as well? If we had a sort of like this way kind of emote, and when I'm standing in this position, like where they're hauling stuff and my character stand like pointing towards them, if the character could kind of track them and turn towards them and is kind of like doing that like a shepherd would with a sheepdog, that would be really, really charming and not super difficult. You just sort of like detect when the character is not being moved. Lovely, lovely bit of VFX. You've done a very good job here of keeping a very restrained color palette that doesn't look too dismal and still kind of looks cute and cartoony, but it doesn't go like into that horrible kind of so bright it looks like a casual game aimed at children type thing, right? I feel like you've done the art direction of this game is superb, because one of the things that I notice over and over again when people are trying to make indie games, particularly people that don't have an art background, is they don't understand the difference between like cartoony and stylized for adults and for children. And someone mentioned Cult of the Lamb a second ago. That's a good reference point where if you just took the illustration style of Cult of the Lamb on its own and looked at it without the color palette, for example, you would think, oh, that's for kids. But then when you add the color palette and it's this sort of edgy black and red and all of the greens and stuff are a little bit dirty, it starts to read as something different. Like Over the Garden Wall is a good example of that. Like, and some things do it different ways. Like Adventure Time is a cartoon that's sort of like for kids, but adults like it. Steven Universe, similar thing. And those are kind of IPs that have very cute colors. But then when you look at the character designs, there's something a bit stranger and more adult going on. So you have to have something that pulls the aesthetic in a direction that says, this isn't like a learn your alphabet game that we've made on a tablet for 5-year-olds. And there's lots of individual art assets in this game that if it didn't have the color palette, you could read it as childish. But there's something about this subdued color palette, which is basically like we're using these warmer, like 1970s colors indoors, which makes it feel cozy. But it also evokes like retro sci-fi, like Alien and Space Odyssey, in a way that makes it feel a little bit more mature. And then because the gray is often this sort of muted purple, we get a little bit of color and a little bit of cozy cuteness, but it's still a little bit drab and spooky, and that kind of feeling of being marooned on a planet is a little bit kind of, it's not a threatening game. We're not being hounded by monsters, but it does make it feel a little bit more mature, and it's just, it's really good art direction. Really, really fits with what the game is trying to do. Zoom out in the interior. Your first collected item is in there. Oh, what's this? Open the hatch. Don't mind if I do. Hang on. Do I need to be standing underneath it? I have to do the computer. Okay. I will leave the hatch open. Rain said, not for this game, but would a viable alternative be going way to the childish art vibes but making it super difficult? I mean, games usually have a way of aesthetically signaling that they're difficult, right? Like, Cuphead and Binding of Isaac are both games that are difficult to the point of almost being cruel. And then if you look at the character designs, it's something that a child would appreciate, but there's still something that like pushes it over into being like slightly menacing, right? We've got a retro TV unit, we've got a double sofa, we've got a TV. Can build some new things. So, let's... some sort of vent on those bits that I can't build in front of. Finally, we have invented television. Maybe I want the television there. Go like that. Does that work? And then move the sofa over here. Very nice. Just want to like create a little, sort of subsection of the room so that the bed is like in its own little cozy corner. There we go. Something like that. Oh, I can't put the bed at a 45-degree angle. The sofa at a 45-degree angle. Man, feng shui in this place is all out. The problem is that the sofa is sort of designed to be at a curve, and it's very hard to put it opposite the thing you want to point it at. As Homer Simpson said, if you don't have a TV, how do you know where to point your furniture? Retro cupboard. Okay, let's So yeah, again, think about the color palette here. There are pops of bright color that are used to help you identify things that might be important or useful. They're also chosen to make the place feel a bit alien, like the purple. But then we've got these very kind of drab feeling neutral colors in the background as well. A very little gray that is actually gray. Let's build a new bot. I don't want to center the rug. The room is already too symmetrical. Too symmetrical. Symmetricalness is good for functionality. It's not good for vibes. I think wanting to arrange furniture so that it's symmetrical might be a psychopath test. Not sure. Got anything else we can scan for? It's found the trophy that I already got. Okay. Is that because I still need to go and do something to... I get a sneaking suspicion we've done all of the stuff, but... Mr. Power-Up said it seems confusing which bots are working and which are waiting around. Yeah, I think you could do some stuff with, like, putting... If you put a little light on their antenna and, like, change the color of their face LEDs and the little lights on the top to sort of indicate states. A 1. Excellent. You know, so... Like, when they're waiting around, maybe they have a blue face. Look at their little faces! Occasionally changing. When they're waiting around, they have, like, a blue face and they don't have a lit-up antenna. And then when they're like, responding to an order, maybe their face changes color and they get a little light. Just, like, a couple of little state changes. What I would avoid doing, though, don't just have, like, lights on the antenna and the face change color and, like, have a different color for every state. Like, try and have some... It's kind of like I was saying about the building interface. Sometimes you need something to sort of change shape as well as just change color so that people understand that there's, like, a fundamentally different thing going on. So I would, like, imagine, you know, they have little lights and when they're not doing anything, those aren't on at all. And then when they're doing something, they come on and... I don't know, there's a few different things you can do there that will make them more cute and make them feel alive and also help deal with some of those problems that were just called out about it just not being obvious when they're doing stuff. Work hats would be very funny. I mean, that's kind of what Little King Story did with Pikmin, right? So I'm going to show you it quickly. So let's take a quick look at our reference games. Pikmin. So Pikmin, right, you've got different types of Pikmin and you're kind of like ordering them around and they sort of follow you and stuff. Still never played it. Maybe I should do one of the Switch ones if I've never played a Pikmin. And then the Switch, the Wii game I really liked that was very much just based on Pikmin with some story stuff thrown in was... probably quite hard to see at this resolution, actually, but So Little King's story was Pikmin with little dudes, and you would train them up. So you would kind of collect them from your village, and then you would train them to be a knight or a builder or something. And then the main controls worked pretty much the same as Pikmin. And I don't know why they're dancing around with cow skulls on here, but that was kind of a similar thing, like a kind of job-based system. And you could do a more temporary version of that where they get little hats. See, here's got a farmer hat, and these are guards, so they've got these little gold helmets on. And they've got like a little symbol that indicates their rank and how much XP they've got. But yeah, this is... I think you're onto a good thing here, because... I've been thinking a lot about recently about, like, someone posted a thing in our Discord the other day about design patterns. Like, a design pattern is like a thing in game design that you can recognize from elsewhere, and that could be as big as a genre, right? A genre is a design pattern, and it can be a smaller thing like a crafting system or like a different type of crafting system. When you look at one game and go, okay, you know, Minecraft has a crafting system where we place objects in a grid and then we get an object, and another game might just have a crafting system where you go into an inventory and you like pick a thing and it says you don't have enough stuff, right? And following design patterns can be very helpful because you sort of know how other people have solved problems before. And I think like making a game is always a trade-off between like where do you put the innovation and where do you just do stuff in a way that you know already works because other games have done it. Obviously, if you... the goal is never to just make the most like amazingly unique thing that no one has ever seen. The goal is usually to find this balance between which parts of my game are familiar and just work the way people expect and they can like understand them because they played other similar games, and which parts of my game are going to be kind of new and work differently. And one of the kind of qualities I can see in this game that's very kind of like a good sign for this being a potentially good game if Nate keeps working on it, is that all of the bits of the game that could be a little bit clunky and unusual just kind of work the way you'd expect, like build menus, right? The core economy of this sort of Animal Crossing type thing, like you do stuff outside to gather resources and you build practical things outside and then you get rewarded with stuff to decorate your house. None of that is unusual, and that's fine because when we need to like work out which parts of our design need to be bold and unusual and which parts of our design need to be safe and familiar, and sometimes you can get that ratio wrong, or you can put the boldness in a part of the game where it doesn't add any value. And one of the things that I really like about this is that the boldness is in places where it's the stuff people are going to care about, right? Like the fact that we have a slightly unusual control system for managing the robots is interesting. And although, yeah, we can compare it to Pikmin, I think it's very telling that Pikmin is our reference point, right? Because when you go, oh, this game is like game X, and that's a game that came out like 20 years ago, and there isn't like a recent indie equivalent, then that's kind of telling that this is a design pattern we know works and has been successful in a previous game, but it's not one that the indie market is currently saturated with. That's a really good thing to look for. And that's kind of how you make games that have a good chance of standing out and being like leaders rather than followers, is you look for design patterns that have worked that don't currently exist in the indie space. And I think whenever someone is comparing your game and the reference point is something from 20 years ago rather than something from last year, that's a good sign for that. Because, you know, if your game is too unique and you don't have anything to compare it to, that might be a sign that your game is kind of nonsense and won't make sense to anyone. But if you can compare it to games, but only games that came out a while ago, you've got a kind of different thing. And like, you know, Stardew Valley is a good example of that, right? When Stardew Valley came out, all there was to compare it to was Harvest Moon, which was like an older series. Now, anyone that makes one of those games, people are comparing it to Stardew Valley because what it did was to take a bunch of proven design patterns from a long time ago and like make a new modern version of that with a few little tweaks. And like iterating on something and tweaking it to be slightly different doesn't provide as much value if it's a new thing, right? If you take Node Busters, and if you take Node Buster or like Vampire Survivors and you copy that formula and you tweak it a little bit, you're not kind of serving an untapped audience. You're just making something slightly different for an audience that already exists but is having lots of things made for it. Whereas if you take something from like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago and tweak the formula slightly, then you're much more likely to be like serving up a proven design pattern, but to a potentially larger audience, because what people find fun doesn't change that much. And if an audience is not being served, then there's a gap there, right? And the thing I really like about this is there's so much in it that's familiar, and that I can go, oh yeah, that's like that game, that's like that game. But like the art direction is unique. Like it's kind of cute enough for the cozy game crowd to like it. But again, this type of game, if it doesn't have NPC interactions, a lot of the time people are going to go, well, I'd rather play something else. But because of the particular fantasy it's doing, it's kind of okay for the cuteness to come from the robots. Again, like I said with Slime Rancher, right? Slime Rancher, very, very cute game. But often when we see cute aesthetics and little creatures, we expect those creatures to do a lot. They're either NPCs we're going to talk to, or they are like Pokemon that where we're doing a creature collector and they have like a personality that's expressed through what they can do in combat. What Slime Rancher did was it took that kind of cute creature collector thing, and instead of making them as like characters with personalities, they were resources, which is like a bit dark when you think about it, but it worked very, very well. And I think you're doing a similar thing with your robots here. So the more of your effort goes into making sure these guys, you know, have different qualities or different kind of modes they can be in, you know, little upgrades, whether they're permanent or temporary. I would vouch for temporary because it's going to give the player more busy work and help you bypass some like balancing issues that might come from giving them permanent upgrades, and like, you know, players optimizing the fun out by finding that one upgrade is just better to have all the time. You know, if you made it a little bit more situational where you can kind of give them temporary software updates and stuff like that, and then just lots of ways of like visually communicating the difference of the characters, like with Pikmin, where they can change their faces and lights and stuff, and, you know, maybe get little boosters that make them go faster. That feels like that's sort of doubling down on the place in the game where the value really is from a kind of creative direction and fantasy appeal. So, yeah. So in terms of whether to add NPCs, I think it could add a lot of value. I think the trick is, so a lot of these questions of scope, right? They come down to where are you in the project, and like what have you decided about the nature of this project and how long are you doing it. I talked about this in the Q&A video last week, I think, or the week before. Like, what is the appropriate scope for a game kind of comes from two directions. One is from the developer's side of like, how long do I have to make this game? You know, do I want it to be out in a year? Do I want it to be out in 3 months? And how much time am I spending on it? That's the developer side of defining scope. And then there's the side that comes from players, which is sort of defined by the type of game you're making, right? So as soon as you go down the route of having NPCs you can talk to, it sort of opens up players maybe expecting certain depth of content or whatever. Not necessarily always. It depends how it's presented. You know, a game like Dredge, where you're mainly just doing a job and then you meet characters and they give you a quest. I think people aren't going into that expecting the characters to have like romance options and Stardew Valley backstories and stuff. But yeah, a lot of it really comes down to where are you in the project? Like, what's the status of the project as well? Because I think a lot of the time people are in this kind of weird semi-professional space where you're kind of making games as a hobby. Regardless of what you're doing with your current game, you're going to spend 10 hours a week making games, right? So then it's a case of like, am I going to continue making this game for as long as possible, or do I want to finish it and get on to something else? And all of those questions factor in to those other questions of scope and whether you should have a feature like NPCs or something. My advice would always be to like keep doubling down on the stuff that's already in the game that's appealing. And then if you've got a big ticket feature like characters that give you quests or something like that, keep that in your mind, because you kind of make your own little like marketplace of ideas, and they go up and down in value depending on the context. Like if you start posting about this on social media and you start making TikToks of the game and you start developing a following and you start getting some wish lists for it because you got the Steam page up and stuff like that, and lots of people are starting going, oh, it's a bit lonely, I want to meet some characters, that's a very clear signal from people who are already interested in your game that that feature has like increased in potential value. But it might not be worth doing it early on, because then you're saying to people this feature will be part of the game, and then you're like raising their expectations of it. So it might be better to just like keep that feature on the back burner, not do anything with it just yet, and then double down on the stuff you know is already good, start kind of promoting it, building a community around it. And then if you find out that the community that gravitates toward this game really want a little bit more of a social element and characters to talk to, then you can start to work out how you do that. And I think there's a danger of like putting a little bit of everything you want to be in the game into the game, because then when you start showing it to people and going, this is what I'm making, it becomes very hard to pull things back out, right? Whereas if you kind of keep them on the back burner, double down on the stuff you know is good, then start to sort of co-develop it with your player base in mind, then you can bring things in that you wanted to do all along. So I would think about that. But yeah, I like what Rain said about characters that you can't speak to or that are just very alien in some way. I think the kind of fantasy of being on a like just like alien creatures that maybe are non-hostile but they interact with you in a particular way, or like you know, maybe I need these mushrooms and there's a creature that comes along and eats the mushrooms, and I can scare it off by driving my robots over to it. It's scared of the robots and it eats the mushrooms. But maybe there are some situations where I want it to eat the mushrooms, because when it's eating a mushroom it poops something else out, you know. So you could, if you see a need for it to feel less lonely and to feel like there's something social going on, I think doing that through strange animals that are a little bit gross and scary and a little bit cute at the same time, that could be quite a good way of like adding more gameplay depth and making sure the game doesn't feel too lonely, but again doing it in that more Slime Ranchery way where the quote-unquote characters are actually just sort of like mobs that add some gameplay value. That could be a kind of good direction to think in. I was thinking about what's the Robert Pattinson sci-fi, Mickey 17, is it Mickey 17, where he's like a clone that keeps coming back to life. There are some good alien designs in that where they're kind of gross and cute at the same time. And I feel like, you know, yeah, Merlod's right. The fantasy of being alone on the moon with my drones is not having to talk to people. Yeah, exactly. So I would always think about, if you see a perceived need in the game, like, oh, this is too lonely, and people who like this, because this is a real kind of chain of like value thinking that could happen with this game. People see this game, they like that it's cute. It's the kind of cute cozy games community who like cute things, and therefore they want it to be a little bit more about like relationships and kind of tend and befriend. Because I see this quite a lot with developers who don't play cozy games and then start making one, and they go, oh, my game's cozy because it looks like this, and it's like, well, no, cozy is often about the thematics, right? So back in the day with like Zynga and Farmville and stuff, we used to refer to this as tend and befriend. Animal Crossing is a tend and befriend game. Farmville is a tend and befriend game. Harvest Moon and Stardew Valley are tend and befriend games where they're like, the goal structure of the game is to meet people, learn about them, look after them. And cozy games generally, there's like one side of cozy games that's about that, and then there's one side of cozy games where it's like games like A Little to the Left and Unpacking, where there's no social element in those games, but they are still fundamentally like grounded games about domestic life in some way. And I think a lot of the time people that don't play cozy games, they start making a cute looking game and they go, oh yeah, it's cozy, and then I look at it and it doesn't have any of those qualities, and I think this isn't for anyone. So a real thing that could happen with this game is people see the aesthetic, they're attracted to it, and then they kind of gravitate towards it, and then they find out that although it looks initially cute, there's not enough in the game to give them those moments of like squee, which is kind of what you want from a cozy game, right? And I say that as someone who does like these games and plays them. So you want to make sure that that initial response that we have to the cute robots keeps going. And you can do that through the robots, and you can do it through introducing other creatures. I think the best bet for you might be to think about creature interactions that aren't verbal, that aren't, you know, we're not meeting an old man up here who wants us to go and collect his basket or something. It's like we meet a weird little creature that's kind of ugly and kind of cute at the same time, you know, kind of Lilo and Stitch type territory, that weird slug thing from Mickey 17. Because what that does is it ups the cute value, it doubles down on the cute value of the game, but it also does it in a way that's going to help with your core mechanic of moving the robots around. Because if we have creatures and they respond differently to the robots, and like some of them run away from the robots, or some of them chase the robots and grab them, right? Then we can have like a really fun, rich ecosystem that's sort of fun to play around with and gets a little bit of that kind of tend and befriend or creature collector aspect, but still aligns it with the Pikmin part of the game. Whereas if you went down the route of just like dredge style NPCs that stand there and give you a quest, the problem with that is that doesn't interact with your robot mechanic in any meaningful way. So yeah, I think thinking about mobs that aren't enemies, I mean, that's what I've been doing with Golem Gourmet as well. Like, there are enemies you beat up and enemies that attack you, but I tried not to go down the Battle Chef Brigade thing of being like, oh, you're cooking and you get all of your ingredients by beating something up. Often it's a little bit stranger, like there are cows that you bounce on to get milk out of. There are certain creatures where you need to like pick them up and throw them into a thing. So it doesn't necessarily need to be that they are necessarily enemies to be beaten up. It could just be there are a series, there's like you create an ecosystem of a couple of different interactions of like, you know, this thing eats mushrooms and after it eats 3 mushrooms, it does this, right? So it could be that there's a type of creature that is scared of your robots and you're actually trying not to scare it with the robots by making sure they stay away from it, because you actually want this creature to stay near your base and eat 3 of these things in order to poop out 1 of these things. And so you're actually avoiding it and trying not to scare it, right? So befriending and looking after the creatures could end up becoming this thing of like trying to avoid them with the robots or trying to use the robots to bring things to them and stuff like that. You know, maybe there's a creature that attaches to metal things and then you can move it around like by dragging one of those big metal panels that's like debris or something, and that's a way of like taking it somewhere else and for some other benefit. So I would take all of your if you go down that route of like trying to populate the world with creatures, I would take all of the mechanics you already have for what the robots can do and try and like attach a potential creature behavior to it using the things that are already in the game. You know, like this thing does this thing to buildings, this thing like runs away from robots and stuff. Yeah, I mean, Minecraft is the gold standard for this type of stuff. And one of the reasons why is because the way that creatures are implemented in Minecraft is how creatures were always done in traditional roguelikes. That's why they're called mobs, right? Mob is roguelike language, like old school roguelike language. It stands for mobile object. I think they might have used to use it in MUDs as well. But that whole thing of referring to an NPC creature as a mob is something that comes from the design lineage of older games where you had creatures walking around that weren't necessarily all just there for you to fight. So if you see that, if you kind of think of that idea and it immediately brings to mind Minecraft, it's because Minecraft is like the biggest game in the last 20 years that has used that kind of approach to saying, oh, we're going to have all of these creatures and they are sort of doing their own thing and they don't really care about the player a lot of the time. They just sort of like have their own little ecological niche they fit into. That's a very kind of traditional roguelike thing. And we just associate it with Minecraft now because the sort of trad roguelikes, the ASCII grid ones, aren't as popular. But it's also what's going on in something like Caves of Qud as well. So yeah, that was M.O.B.O Moon Machinica, not Machinima. And now we're going to move over to Department of Gravity Management and check it out. I'm really interested to see where this has gone. Oh, I've got two. Hang on. Which of these? Let me just. Which of these is the correct one? I'm gonna say it's the demo. Oh yeah, demo is after playtest, isn't it? It's not heavy till we say it is. This is a great screen because it's sort of showing you how something in the game mechanics works in a kind of funny way. I think one of my main recurrent bits of feedback for this dev is the graphic design and the typography in this game is like the weakest area. And that's not a bad thing, right? I think when you're starting to get feedback on a project that seems kind of a bit petty and small, that's a good indicator that other things in the game are good. Like, I like the visual style of this game. I like the level design from when I played it before. It's an interesting game, but this is the weakest area because it kind of feels like you're trying to do Portal, like that kind of like corporate messaging type stuff, and the graphic design doesn't quite match up with that. And it's really just a case of like looking at the reference points a bit more, because one of the things that this is doing that's a little bit of a design crime is just everything goes all the way up to the edge. And you would never see a professionally produced sort of corporate workplace safety poster where everything goes all the way up to the edge like that. So, you know, I think making all the posters and stuff for this game, it could really elevate it if you go back and spend some time on that. But I also appreciate that it's not the most important thing in the game. Newton's first law, an object at rest, something, something, something. Okay. Oh, that was cool. I did a weird little turn. We've got some full-blown 70s Bauhaus stuff going around here. Color palette is kind of gross, but I don't hate it. It's very clear to see what stuff is, and I quite like this greebly wall. Hello. I hope you had a nice journey. I'm Armand, your artificial region manager overseeing Newtonium deliveries. Welcome to Newtonium Mining Station 1453. Ah. 0G grape. I love to drink my 0G grape and then throw it across the room. Oh, oh, oh. A beverage that makes you float. Wonderful. Please take a few seconds to relax here in our welcome lounge. Not too long, though. We have quotas to meet. That's an incorrect apostrophe because it's a plural. I've created this purple line to help keep you on task. That's fun. Extra heavy root. This is really fun. You've taken, like, a thing that's already in the game. This is kind of what's talking about doubling down, right? You've got a core feature of the game. You make new content. How does it relate to the rest of the content? So here we've got... This wasn't in the game last time I played it. Like, beverages that just temporarily make you really heavy or float around or whatever. Teleport tonic. Twisted lemon lime. What does twisted lemon lime do? Ah! Delicious. Delicious. That's fun. And, you know, these are all optional interactions. This wasn't like a tutorial thing of like, you must try each drink, but I felt compelled to. Do not flush black holes down the toilet. That's fun. Just want to put... It's a little bit unsatisfying that the toilet is so beautifully modelled, but we can't actually put things inside of it. I don't like that. Okay, well... This is your companion toilet paper. Take it with you. I'm going to take my companion toilet paper with me. So these text screens look okay. There's again, it's still right up to the edge, which kind of looks bad, but the blue on black looks a little bit better. This way to the refinement hub, and sorry for the mess of sodas, I'll make sure they're only in the machines from now on. Your predecessor liked to experiment with his own flavours, definitely a waste of time, hence the line. Okay, so now we're doing some fun stuff where the tutorial character is trying to tell us to stick to the line, and there's a bunch of other stuff that's kind of drawing our attention, and it feels, when the game is telling you, walk down this purple line and get on with the game, and then you're kind of being rewarded for looking around and trying other stuff out, that's kind of good, because it is rewarding for the player. There's some emotional payoff there immediately, but also it kind of encourages a particular way of thinking. And I think, you know, like what we were talking about in the last game about the tutorial, where one of the devs in the chat was saying that you know, when do you kind of let go of the guardrails and or let go of the kind of reins and let the player have to work things out for themselves? Well, it's like what you're doing to encourage that. And I think if you have a game that is from the start sort of rewarding you for like disobeying a little bit, then that's what puts you in a particular mindset and lets you know it's a little bit more of a kind of engaged experience where you need to pay attention. To do: complete cognitive tests, get your wrench and gravity attachment, get your gravity suit, follow the purple line and meet your quotas. Unlicensed gravity modifications are prohibited, leaving designated work areas is forbidden, don't flush anything down the toilets. I mean, I can't flush anything down the toilets, that's the problem. It's like, I came here mainly on the understanding that I could take a teleport tonic and put it in the toilet. Ah, there we go. Oh! Hello. Don't mind if... Oh, you can throw a teleport tonic and then it will quota soda. Is that going to make me... Is that going to put my quota up so I've finished my job without having to do it? Yeah, I've finished one quota because I drank a quota soda. And we made a toilet porter. Amazing. Okay, let's make an anti-gravity toilet. It's what kids crave. The kids these days, all they want is an anti-gravity toilet. Oh, no, I didn't want to drink it. Oh, I drank it. Listen, this is wasted on me. We don't need anti-gravity human, we need anti-gravity toilet. Where's it gone? Stuck in the wall. Because I'm so fast. There isn't a way to drop the 0. Do you have the immersive sim tag on this on Steam? Because there are so many things that are marked as imsims that aren't. And yeah, this needs to be marked as an imsim. This is an imsim. Oh. Black hole, black cherry. Have we got any of that in here? Whoa, black cherry. Bam-a-lam. Right, my last chance to try and put a 0G grape in the toilet. It doesn't have a... Yeah, there's no option to throw it. So I think the controls between like throwing the drinks and drinking them is a little bit confuzzled. Cannot rip the AI communicator out of the wall at this time. That's good to know. What's over here? Oh, that's where I came from. This is my little pod I came out of with my special toilet paper. In the hub, you can access all the parts of the station where we've set up Newtonian refinement, but first, we have some cognitive tests to make sure you didn't suffer a mild case of severe brain damage on the journey. Okay. Cool. I definitely didn't suffer a mild case of severe brain damage. And I'll prove it to you. I'll prove it to you. Oh. Oh. Where's my toilet paper gone? There it is. It's pooping time. Ah. Ah. My companion paper was destroyed. I can't go on. Okay. I'm getting some VSync tearing. Is the way I can turn it off? Is it that? Do I need to do that? Let's do it. Is that better? Is it still doing it? It seems to have stopped. Beep. The colours are incredibly garish, but it gives it a visual identity at least. Look at that. Look at that. We're in low G gravity. So that's the welcome lounge. That's the cognitive testing entrance that I would go into if I needed some cognitive testing, which I don't. Good job I don't need any cognitive testing. I can just go up here instead. I love not being cognitively tested. Ah, here I am. In the place I belong. I refuse to be cognitively tested. What's that? Oh, it's doing a little striptease. What's that? This is great stuff. It makes you kind of just look at it and go, how does this world work? I'm glad you don't over-explain too much of it, and there's a lot of just kind of leaving the player to sort of wonder how it works. Cognitive testing entrance. Lemons! Tests complete. 0 of 10. I put the box on the thing. It opens the door so I can go in. What's this? Oh. I get another one. Take it with me. Oh, there can only be... Oh, it's a clone, so it disappears the old one when we get the new one. Okay. These blue portals create gravity fields. We'll shield new employees from their effects since the results can be messy. You can get around with jump pads for now. Okay. Can I, though? When you stand on a jump pad, it charges. Then when you press and release jump, you'll be launched in the direction you're looking. Okay. This is a great mechanic. I like the visual. I guess it's showing the last jump I did when I do that. It's a bit weird that I see it on the time I do the jump. It's a little bit off-putting. Huh. Need to get that to hit there. It's sort of... maybe if I put it in a different place, like I pick it up and I put it further back. and then turn the thing on. Okay, that doesn't work. This is feeling pretty good. One of the things I remember from playing this before was that a lot of the rooms, there were a lot where it kind of felt almost like a weird puzzly incremental game where I just needed to get loads of boxes to like fly around into another thing. And maybe we're going to get to that, but this feels a lot more kind of traditional puzzle game. Which is not a bad thing. I think it's better for onboarding to put us in a more conventional, like, do this little puzzle, move on to the next one type thing. You can go wild with it later on and do much crazier things, but you want to something a little bit simpler early on. What if I do that? Ah, okay, I just needed to like grab it and force it up there. Okay, 3 out of 10. Bring that platform down. There's a conveyor belt type thing going that way, so if I put that in there, does that... It goes like that. So what does that mean? I can put it up there? Ah, so that's a jump pad. But it's not open yet, so I can't use it. That's upside down. Oof. Can't believe I allowed myself to be cognitively tested. This is so embarrassing. Hang on. Ah, we're double cubing. We take the cube back round to the start of the level. Because I remembered there was that hole in the start of the level, and that means we can do that. And now what? Now what's different? Okay. Now I can... What's that done? Basically, we can get cubes and take them to where we're not supposed to have them, I guess, is the long and short of it. So maybe what we're supposed to do is take a bunch of stuff back here. I might be thinking too laterally off the bat. I don't know. Can't see how we would open that jump pad thing. I'm feeling quite cognitively strong, maybe too cognitively strong. And my brain can start riding my brain as a sort of big brain elephant from that sort of Wojak drawing. Weird, it keeps letting me activate the jump pad even though I'm not really touching it. Something strange is happening there. I don't think the thing I'm trying to do is possible, so we're going to leave it. I take my various cubes. So I didn't even want to do that anyway. Didn't really want to do that. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Don't even care. Don't even really care about doing that. What's this? What's going on here? I don't know. Do not enter. Don't know. Seems like something I would do. That's what I was supposed to do, was it? Okay. That was simpler than I made it. So I think that's something we're supposed to do later on. I don't think there's no benefit to putting that cube up there just yet. Take my cube out here, all the way back to the start. Right. I quit. I don't want to work here anymore. This is no longer my workplace. Hit the bricks. You can just leave. Dear reader, he could not just leave. What happens in here when we've got 2 blocks? Because that wasn't something we were able to do earlier on, right? So I don't understand what this panel is doing. It seems to not do anything. Put that on there. And then we could, in theory, get up there, but I can't see any reason why you'd want to. Yeah, I mean, these rooms are quite open. There's just lots of places where you can get, like, red herringed and kind of going in the wrong place, or just sort of going and looking in places out of curiosity. I think there's the sort of opening up of the space from, like, oh, there's a very clear puzzle you're trying to solve in this room, into just, now I need to find various things and from different places and put them together. It feels like it's going in that direction, but the sort of way it's exploded out from one thing into the other is very extreme and quick, I think. It's also very hard to walk to the edge of something without falling off. I feel like we need a safe walk button. It's very hard to like nudge towards the edge to like peel. It feels like you should be able to peer over the edge and pick up a cube and get it up to the thing you're on, but it's quite hard because when you think you're standing on the edge, you fall off. Also this weird thing where I can use jump pads without standing on them. Which seems like it's maybe just one of those bugs where when you're playing your own game, you kind of play it quote-unquote correctly, so you don't notice for a long time. Do not enter. Maybe I am supposed to enter. Maybe they want me to enter the place that says do not enter. Yeah, so Talos Principle does a similar thing to what Baba Is You does. It's a very different game, but because they're both puzzle games, they just have like a... They have a hub, like a hub world. And you have to sort of collect a progression currency to unlock different bits of it, and that means you can do the puzzles in a different order. And Baba Is You just does that through, I think it's stars, can't remember. And Talos Principle does it through these puzzle pieces you collect, and when you've got the correct, like, 4 pieces or whatever, you can open a door to somewhere else. And those systems are very good because they kind of provide you with a lot of goals and, like, help guide you of what there is to do in the game. But they also mean that if you get stuck, you can go and do something else, which is quite important in lateral thinking puzzles because you can't brute force lateral thinking because it's, like, literally sort of using the part of your brain that isn't the conscious thinking part of the brain. So giving people the opportunity to go and try different stuff is good. This one we can just sort of like wander off of our own accord and go and try different stuff, which is good. But it might feel a bit aimless in some places. We've just got a lot of openness and we can kind of go and do what we want. Quota Cola, don't mind if I drink. Let's just pretend I've done some work. Insert quota to play. Newton's Revenge. Okay, we need a block on there, and then we got a boing up there. Need to get a block up there somehow. There's a lot of blocks down here. Oof. Seeing puzzle elements on the walls. Slightly worrying. Okay, so we need to take a block up without hitting the putrid green looking thing, because that will blow up our lovely cube. Oh, hang on. Are we sticking it on the wall like that and then retrieving it from the top? Is that what we're doing? Because I basically get too heavy when I've got the jump pad and then I need to... Ah, there we go. No. We're not jumping right now. Ah! Fell all the way down. I think my block's still up. No! Oh my... Oh dear. Yeah, when you're forced away from the object because it gets trapped and you fall down, the game sort of still registers it as in your inventory, so when you get back to it, it puts it back in your hand. That feels a bit strange and confusing. I would watch out for that. It's like it doesn't deregister the block being the current thing you're holding, and it's not. Doesn't feel good. Okay, now we're back earlier on in the level, I guess. Okay, but we've got a bunch of cubes, so I think we're supposed to take these and throw them down. Hey, Aiden. Oh, guys, I'm getting pretty tired. I woke up way too early this morning. Didn't sleep enough. But this is good. I mean, I guess it's probably helpful to have people testing things when they're not at their best anyway. Okay, test 6. Tests complete 4. So, can I do something here with these now? I've been here before, but I don't think I had any of the blocks I needed. Now I do. What's this? What is that? Uh-oh. Don't like the look of that guy. Doctor Who looking MF. He's gonna zap me. Gravity suppressed. Ah, pink cube. I think I would like to do more on rails, one room at a time stuff before we get this open. I like that you've got the design goal of having the game eventually be very open, but I'm feeling quite bewildered and overwhelmed because of the lack of structure. I think when you look at why those games like Baba Is You and Talos Principle do the things, like, you know, obviously, I think of puzzle games, right? Portal and Talos Principle, both similar games to this. First person 3D puzzle, different approach to kind of structure and progression. Portal is like, you do a level, you go to the next level. And that works. And it works partly because it's a story-based game as well. And then Talos Principle, it's a little bit more open. You still have to do the banks of levels in roughly the same order as everyone else, but if you get stuck with one, you can go and do another one. But the kind of structure of those games means that if you are feeling a bit, like, stupid, because you're feeling frustrated with one level, you can kind of go and do something else, and you don't have to get lost in order to do that. The problem that I'm experiencing with this game a little bit is, if I don't know what I'm doing in a particular level, the experience of like going to try and find a different puzzle to solve means that I need to kind of wander around and get lost a little bit. So you get kind of sort of double frustration, because the thing that should save you, from the most frustrating thing that can happen in the game, which is basically you're doing a puzzle and your brain just won't find the solution, because that's the thing with puzzles. You sort of, it's like magic eye pictures. You have to keep kind of looking at them from different angles and trying different things, because they're exercises in lateral thinking, which you can't consciously make your brain do. And that's why you do need or it's why it's helpful to have optionality in puzzle games. And I had this recently. I was playing a 3D soccer band game that was one of our community members' entries into GMTK, I think. And it was a soccer band, but it was third person. You can move the camera around. And I was thinking, oh, this actually solves some of the problems I have with soccer band games, because there's something I can sort of fidget with and fiddle with and look at the game from different angles as I'm trying to work out the puzzle. Which the problem I have with soccer band games is that I'm looking at a chessboard, and if I can't see the solution, I'm just like trial and erroring things and trying to brute force it, which I don't find fun. So I think there's this question of like, in a puzzle game, when the player can't find the solution, what do they have to do? And this is quite a good, this has some quite good ways of dealing with that, because it has like toy-like interactions where you can just like pick things up and throw them around for fun. But if the player is very goal-orientated and they're like, no, I want to, you know, if I can't do this puzzle, well, I want to go and do another puzzle. I want to get the good feeling of like having at least one eureka moment. Then the way that the game is currently structured is like, I can get lost going to look for a different puzzle. So the thing that's there that should be a sort of release valve for the frustration I have of being sort of cognitively lost in the puzzle is sort of like doubled down on by the fact that I can get like literally lost looking for a different puzzle to do. Hello? Cannot grab too heavy? Well. Hello. 4 connected robots. And that connects to somewhere up there. Is that relevant? Do we need to know that? Is this kind of pipe thing looks like it might mean something? That cable? Oh no, I destroyed all of the robots. What a shame. Black hole juice, won't you come and murder all the robots? This is open, but I can't. Oh, I need to just aim higher. There we go. So, to kind of go back to what I was saying earlier about like horticulture and games that feel like they've turned a corner, this does feel like it's turned a corner. I do feel like it's sort of introducing new problems, but those things will get smoothed out the more that you have playtesting done with this. There's still stuff about the graphic design that I find difficult, like the color choice is incredibly garish, the typography is incredibly garish. Some of that could be charming in its own way, but it's sort of, I don't know how to appreciate, because it doesn't quite look like kind of corporate, and I think it's trying to do corporate, but it's sort of like trying to do unhinged corporate, right? Which is stuff like, trying to think of what my art references would be. I mean, We Happy Few is not the right time period. So look at the Aperture Science posters in Portal. I guess part of it is that they're weathered to look old. So one of the things you could do in your game is if you want all of your printouts to look more like signs and posters, maybe there's like a method where you can put like a shader or a texture over them that's a transparent PNG with a little bit of damage on it. if you look in image libraries, like in Canva, for example, if I'm trying to make like a CD cover and I want it to look like old paper, there's all these like damage filters that are just like a transparent PNG with loads of bits of damage around the edge. That could help. You can probably get similar damage filters where you can make something look like a metal sign with chips and stuff in it. That might help a little bit. I think the graphic design in your game is suffering from everything being pushed up right to the edge, although they're doing that a little bit here, but it looks a little bit less extreme because we've got like variations in font size and stuff. But I think the other, I mean, Deathloop in-game posters. We need like a library of these. There's got to be like something that is... I swear they had some of this stuff in Deathloop, but I don't think I'm going to find it. Whereas like in-game propaganda posters. But no, this is more like... I mean, that's kind of the sort of Bauhaus thing you're going for with those stripes around the levels and stuff. I think trying to like make these signs look more like printed signs in some way would be helpful. I quite like the garish color scheme. It definitely gives the game a visual identity. It's just, I know it's going to put people off as well. I'm gonna wrap this up soon because I'm sort of hitting my threshold of how much I'm willing to just wander around and bump into things. But it does... I like that you've sort of chosen a structure for the game. I think it might still be a little bit too open for the first sort of half hour or so. Like, I think the way that this is currently working, where there's a bunch of different test chambers and we can kind of go between them, is cool. But it might be something for like 2 hours in or something rather than straight away. The Hidden Office. I'll look at Anacrusis in a minute. And I think we should look at like other Portal-like games like the Encleverment Experiment or whatever it was called. Those would be quite good to... Level 2. So I didn't finish all of those. Oh, I've done 7 out of 10 tests. Okay. See, I think another thing that I'm experiencing that is worth thinking about a little bit here is because the test chambers are not discrete where we finish one and go into the next one. I don't feel like I've got the little like ping to let me know that I did something correctly. Where it's like, you know, with discrete test chambers, you finish one and you go to the next one, and that keeps things simple, but it also gives you like a little reward of like, yeah, I did something right. Whereas I feel a little bit like sometimes when that number is incremented from 4 to 7, the last time I saw this sign, it said 4 out of 10, and now it says 7 out of 10. And those 3 increments that have happened, I don't really understand when that happened, right? So yeah, I would think about that, because there's a moment there to sort of give the player a pat on the back, or 3 moments to give the player a pat on the back, go, you're doing well, you're doing right. And what was happening in what I should have experienced as like completing 3 tests just felt like one long contiguous thing of like trying to find the next thing I could open and get through, because there's not those like moments where it's like, well done, now you're going down in an elevator to the next one or something like that. And I don't think it needs to be that super on rails as something like Portal, but I think we're maybe like drifting off too far where it's less on rails than Portal, and then it's also less structured than something like the Talos Principle, because we don't have that kind of discrete ending to a particular trial that goes, right, time for the next one. And it's a shame, because I think what we saw with that first section of puzzles where it kind of loops back round and you can take things from one area into another area, that's really cool, and I want to see more of that. But I think a lot of players are going to want that sort of thing to come later on in the game, because it feels like you're breaking a format which hasn't properly been established yet, and maybe you need to establish the format a little bit more early on, because having those moments of like You completed test number 5. Well, hey, ding. You completed test number 6. Didn't. That's part of the onboarding of making players feel like they're smart and they want to do more of the game. And I just had like, I did 3 tests at once, apparently. And I didn't really feel the sense of reward of completing each one because they were just strung together into one long, confusing soup. Yeah, so, yeah, colour palette, a little bit noisy. And I think Robin said it feels a bit like the colour choices are at odds with the greebly stuff, because this is very sort of like Star Wars industrial, right? And then this is almost like kids' soft play area colours. And I think the thing that irks me is that these are like, you know, if you had a 16 colour palette, like on a ZX Spectrum or MS Paint or something, these are the shades of colour that would be in that. Like the maroon, the very bold ultramarine. And it's, I it fights with my brain a little bit. And this is also just like this doesn't evoke anything in particular. You know, if it was white text on a blue sign, it would at least start to make us think of like hospital signs or road signs or subway signs, and it would be following like a recognizable kind of corporate or municipal sign design. Whereas having like a colored text on a white background, it makes me think like, why is this colored in this way? It doesn't like match up with anything I expect. So let's just have a quick look at, what was the game someone mentioned before? Anacrusis. I don't think I've ever played Anacrusis. Okay, so that's doing the retrofuturism thing as well. Retrofuturist sci-fi, so it's kind of like early Star Trek stuff with like I mean, part of why this works is they're doing, again, it's Deathloop, so they're doing the very specific color palette that's doing a particular time period. Yeah, and then in Cleverment Experiment, this was like, no, that's not what I'm thinking of. What am I thinking of? Quantum something. Other games that were like Portal. It was the Quantum something. How pretty Manifold Garden is. Never played that game. Cube 2. Talos Principle, literally just doing the Portal blue and orange again. Oh, maybe I'm thinking of Superliminal. I think I am thinking of Superliminal. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these games, they have quite a... You know, they're quite sparing with the actual art assets in the game, but then they're very stylish in terms of how they look. Quantum Conundrum, that's what I'm thinking of. So look at Superliminal, very kind of stylish looking. Quantum Conundrum. This is, the art direction is more like Hello Neighbor or something, or like a Psychonauts or something like that. But even here, look how limited the color palettes are in each screen. So you've got puzzle elements that are in yellow. It's just much more restricted. And I mean, the other one is Object Impermanence, which someone sent me into play like last year. Again, like really, really restricted color scheme. And there's something I like about this game being garish, right? I kind of like, but particularly if we go back to that start area, can I go back to the little cafe? Go back to the little cafe, right? There's something that goes well between like slightly naff graphic design and the kind of sense of humor of the the computer asking if you've got brain damage from traveling through space and stuff like that. It kind of goes well together, but there's something about the graphic design and the color choices that at the moment feels like it's kind of, it doesn't feel convincingly like it's being kind of tacky on purpose. It feels like it's an accident. And I don't really know how you resolve that aside from learning a bunch of graphic design rules and just being maybe just a bit more restricted about the color palettes, you know? Like, if we want to have a purple line that we can refer to and make gameplay relevant, maybe it's just a case of like desaturating it a little bit. And then, yeah, just making sure we don't do text all the way up to the edges of things like that. But I like this. I think that the structure of it makes it a little bit bewildering, especially because you're tired. And it, like I said, we miss the opportunities to get those small wins of completing a test chamber because I just don't know when I'm completing one and going into the next one. It's not super clear. But it does feel, you know, there was a version of this I played that was more like a kind of panicky shooter with the physicsy stuff in it as well. And maybe that's later on. But I feel like even now that we've got a little bit more structure, it feels like it's accelerating into overcomplicated territory a little bit too quick. The puzzle design is cool. The puzzles that we did were interesting. I love the fact that there are things where you like complete one test and then you take things back round into the one previously. But that feels like a sort of unfolding that should happen deeper into a game and not in the first sequence, because it tells you we're going to do cognitive testing. There's 10 tasks, and we start doing them, and then by the time I'm on the 4th or 5th one, I start to lose track of the end of one test and the start of another one. And I think it's because just having a door with test 1 or test 2 doesn't feel like enough of a kind of fanfare is being made of the fact that you finished one thing and gone into the next one. I know I'm kind of really hammering that point home, but it was really quite shocking to see that sign increment from 4 to 7 when I'd just been sort of like wandering around muddling through, you know? And I think it's because we have 2 tests that are very simple, you know, what you'd expect them to be in like a AAA puzzle game, which is like tutorials presented as a story element. But we get up to about the 4th one and then it seems to open up in a way that I just didn't expect. And doesn't feel like a continuation of those test chambers kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, those are kind of the big things I think are to think about. I think you sort of like proven that you can design the end of this game, right? Like all of the kind of toys that you've got in the toys in the toolbox or tools in the toy box are good, and I think you've done a lot to sort of show that you can arrange them in a way that makes for compelling puzzles. But I do think maybe if we want the player to be onboarded in the sense of like, you know, enjoying themselves and wanting to continue, then we might have to on-rails it a little bit for the first half hour or, you know, whatever percentage of the game. Robin is suggesting that you earn a little bean. It's like, I only play games where you can earn beans. That's all I'm interested in. Black hole cherry. Upsets me that I can't get the other can back. There it is. Ah, it's in there. Take it. Give me my other drink. I want to take it with me. Yeah, I think maybe the quota cans are supposed to fulfill that role a little bit here, Robin, where it's like you get a point for drinking a quota soda. But that, again, that feels like it should be like a cheat for later on in the game, you know? Like, early on in the game, you fulfill the quotas the way that the company expects you to, and then you find the quota sodas. Because I only know, at this stage of the game, I only know what a quota is because I played the previous version of the game that started you off in the more kind of job simulatory place of moving the quantum cubes around and doing the unloading and stuff. So I kind of know what completing a quota is because I've played the game before and I've played stuff that might be sort of later on in this version of the game. But giving players like a cheat to get a quota point this early in the game doesn't make sense now because we don't know what a quota is. I don't have a iota of a quota. Okay, I'm going to round that up now because I don't think I can sort of contribute any more to this one. I like where it's going. I would keep iterating on the art style to try and make it a bit more coherent. I think you can do the puzzles. I think you've created lots of compelling puzzle content with this stuff, but just thinking about how the structure of the game makes it doubly frustrating when you're stuck, I think is a good thing to think about. And making sure it's rewarding to finish parts of the puzzle sequence as well, you know? But that's it from me today, and let me just pop over to the YouTube channel and see what we've got scheduled. I did all my scheduling for the month yesterday, and that means I've completely forgotten what it is now. Have a look. So, what have we got coming up? We're going to do Games with Swords. That is, I am the sword. Today I will destroy you. 6 slashes and bestest knight. That is next week. We're going to do the community prototype amnesty next week, which basically means that all of the games that have been sent to me that were patrons games, I have just dumped them in there if they don't fit another theme. We're on the 15th. We've got 3 games which are games where you're investigating either as a detective or a journalist. Cute games on the 22nd. 24th, a couple of like action or action puzzly pixel art games that have some sort of precision element. And then Kairos and Vega Chronicle at the end of the month, which are both strategy games. I would say about 70 to 80% of the games I've scheduled have been patrons games this month. So the way it works is if you look at the 2 links at the bottom of the screen, on patreon.com/indie game clinic, there are like rewards for people that support the channel. And one of those is you get kind of priority playtesting stream stuff. So, you know, if you think of like, if you went to college to do art or well, it depends what it was, but I would say software, it kind of depends how it's taught. But a lot of the time, if you do like a creative hands-on thing at college, you know, a lot of the benefit from doing it in a classroom rather than learning from a video course is that you critique each other's work and you show each other your work. And that means that rather than like, if you try and learn something like design from a course, and when I say a course, I would like a video course where you're not interacting with anyone else. That's obviously very appealing to like people that can't afford to go to college for a start, but also to people that are very introverted. And then later on, they're like, "Oh, I hate having to do marketing because I have to talk to people." And it's like, well, that's because you only trained the skills where it's like physically doing something. You didn't train the kind of interpersonal skills that you need to like be successful at these things. And when you like learn something from videos, you never really train those skills. So what I try and do is this kind of thing where we kind of sit around and we look at each other's games together and talk about it. So I know that some people who watch these streams, whether you're in the chat now or watching back on a VOD, it's very easy to come at this thing and go, oh, it's an expert who's going to explain to me how to think. And I'm trying to provide you with opportunities to do that thinking because that's actually what matters here. And although I might be giving the developer some feedback that they may be able to use, what I'm trying to do is model design thinking, which is to think about something in a like problem oriented way, and the problem and solution oriented way, which is to do with like the end user experience of the thing. Because what happens is that the main barrier to entry for making games is like the technical ability to code the game. So people learn that and then they think that's all there is. And then maybe they also think, oh, okay, I need to make it look good, so I'll learn art, or I'll let someone else to do that. And then they never really get to the stage of thinking about like, what actually makes this fun? How can I make it more fun? Because the initial like technical hurdle to get the skills to be able to make something in the first place is so high that once people have achieved that, they think, well, I've done the hardest part. The rest is just having ideas, isn't it? And that's why there are so many people who are technically capable of doing something, but they can't make anything that anyone else enjoys or connects with. And this isn't really unique to games. It's something very pronounced in games, but you see it in every type of creative thing. You know, there are more people who can shred on the guitar, like play really blisteringly fast technical guitar and know their scales really well, but they can't write a piece of music, and they're not in a band that is making music that anyone cares about, because they have so strongly like hyper focused on being very technically good at something and technically impressive at something, and they haven't focused on the part which actually allows listeners to connect with that thing. And that's why you have like guitarists like people like Satriani and Steve Vai, where their entire fandom is just people who are really excited about someone playing guitar really well. But that's not why most people listen to music, right? It's not a problem that is unique to games, because you have these hobbies that are technical, and then people get into them because they enjoy doing the technical thing, and they never really advance past that into thinking of it as something you do for someone else. And that's fine up until the point where you make the decision, I'm going to make a game on my own. Because games for a very long time haven't been made by one person on their own. You know, you can go back all the way in the history of the medium and there's always been solo projects. But basically, you know, during the 80s, when the industry started to expand and technology got better, you started to get situations where people will make games in teams, and someone is there to do the art, and someone is there to do the sound, and someone is there to do the game design. So for a very long time, it hasn't been normal to make a game on your own. And the thing is, no one is forcing you to make a game on your own. And when you decide to do that, you're taking on the responsibility for like making sure all of these other parts of the game are good. But some people never really get to that stage, because they just think, well, you know, I can do the technical bit, and that's all that matters. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is design isn't something where someone can just sort of teach you a set of rules. You need to sort of practice it as a sort of thinking skill. And I think the best questions you can ask is like, when you're looking at someone else's game, one of the reasons why it's so important to be interested in other people's games and what they're making, and not just the thing you're working on, is it's a lot easier to hone your design skills when you're looking at someone else's project. And the reason for that is that if you imagine, like, if you were a programmer and you're working in someone else's studio, other people make decisions about what you do, and then you just sort of solve the problem of how am I engineering that, which is ideal for some people. And this is why I'm saying no one needs to make a game entirely on their own. If you've decided to do that, then that's fine. But if you don't like doing art and you don't like doing design, then don't make a game on your own. You know, program someone else's game. There are opportunities for you to do that and get paid. But in a larger studio, you know, someone else is making decisions, and then the programmers and the artists are implementing them. And the thing is, if you're doing everything yourself, then you're always very conscious of the spend of your time and energy on things. And that means that you can look at your game and you can see a problem with it, like a performance problem with the code, or a visual problem with how things look. And you know the problem's there, but deep down you like don't want to tell yourself to fix it, because you're sort of at war with yourself. You're kind of like creative director, game designer side is like advocating for the player and going, this thing needs to be better. But the artist or programmer in you who needs to actually do the work is saying, yeah, but can we not? Can we not do that thing? Do we have to like refactor that code? Do we have to like rebuild that feature? Do we have to recreate those art assets? And one of the reasons why it's really helpful to do what we're doing now and to make sure that you are engaging with other people's games and giving them feedback is it's much easier to practice being critical about game design on other people's projects than on your own project. Because with your own project, we do this thing, sunk cost fallacy, like I don't want to see the problems because I don't want to have to implement the solutions type thing. And I feel like the more you spend time helping other people with their designs and like looking at other people's games critically, the more likely you are to look at your own games critically. And this is why there are so many people that have started as games journalists and games critics and then gone on to like learn code later in life or get jobs later in life, like designing other people's games or designing games and running a team, because they've kind of like already honed one of the main skills. And people say like, oh, everyone's a critic, like don't criticize things you can't make. I don't think that's true. I think those things are fundamentally linked. I think it's the same skill, like the ability to look at something and think about why it is and think about how it could be better. That is just the theory part of the practice of like programming it to be better. And like when we're doing like a tech first approach to game design, you're making hundreds of little design decisions about how fast something is or how frequently it happens. You're doing it all of the time, and then you're like gut feeling it based on what you think is good in a game. And then the kind of design thinking is being able to step back from that and going, well, actually, you know, maybe when that character jumps in the air and they fall down, maybe that's a realistic rate of fall, but maybe the type of game I'm making, it would be better if they fell more slowly so you could steer more in the air because da-da-da, and so on and so forth. And, you know, as I say, I just think it's always easier to learn how to be a good designer by looking at games that you don't have to do the implementation on, because we just have this terrible habit of, with our own games, just trying to avoid seeing what's obviously wrong with them. And it's a lot easier to train that skill when you're looking at other people's games. So that's why I do things this way. You know, someone was saying to me just yesterday, like, I used to do a lot of videos where people sent in a very general question of like, how do I do project management, or how do I do this? And I did a few videos like that, and now I only do them on the Patreon, where it's like, I know who you guys are and I can answer your questions and I can talk about your specific projects and situations. But I really hate trying to like create one size fits all guidance that is applicable to hundreds of thousands of people, because that's just not how these things work. Like every game that someone is making is a different thing. It's being made in a different context, where you've got like I said at the start of this stream, you know, you've got a project context that you're in that is made up of like, what am I currently making? What are the skills I already have? You know, what have I made in the past? And all of those things factor in to deciding whether any given idea that you might have on that game, on that project, is a good idea or not. So whenever anyone then wants you to universalize that and go, can you tell me what's a good idea? Like, what should I make? What should I generally do with my life? It's not, I don't think it's even ethical to talk to people that way about making things, because fundamentally you're infantilizing people and treating them as if they need to learn a rule, when what they really need to learn is like a principle and a way of thinking about something, right? So, you know, the rule would be something like, you know, always make your first level last. That's like a good rule of thumb. And the reason it's a good rule of thumb is because it encapsulates all of this wisdom about, you know, why do we make the first level fast? Why did they do that with Mario? Why did they do that with Doom? It's because you don't know what the game is until you've made it. You don't understand what parts of the game people need to be tutorialized into understanding until you've made the game and tested it lots of times. But if you just follow the rule and you just follow the make your first level last, instead of actually understanding the theory, the like methodological theory behind that rule, then you never learn to think for yourself, because you're just doing things because other people have told you to. And that's like a deference to authority fallacy that you're using on yourself. Like every time you go down this route of thinking like, I should do things in this way because this important successful person told me to do it that way, that is like you're deferring responsibility for your own decision making to someone else, because you think that absolves you of like the risk of having to make your own decisions. But fundamentally, like making things, putting them out in the world, asking people to give you money for them, you are being an entrepreneur. You're sort of putting yourself in the position of like owning a business, or at least creating a product and behaving like a business. And that requires you to sort of like take accountability and responsibility for the choices you make as a designer, as, you know, at the top level, what sort of games am I making? At the micro level, like what little decisions do I make in my game to make it look or feel better? All of these things are your responsibility. And it's very good to like go out there and seek kind of perspectives from people, but don't go out there and just get one Sid Meier quote or one Tim Kaine quote or one Tom Francis quote and then be like, this person said this, therefore it's true in every situation. That's not how it works. And I think one of the things that I found frustrating being on YouTube over the past, when did I start this? 2 years ago. I've been doing this for 2 years now, is that people don't want the nuanced take. They want you to tell them what to do a lot of the time. And that's not necessarily, like, people who are in the chat now, not true of you probably, because you kind of get what this is and how this works and why it works the way it does. But so often people kind of, they want to do this big unusual thing, right? Making a video game, especially making a game on your own or with 2 of your 3 of your friends, that's an unusual thing. It's a risky thing. It's not the sort of thing that normal people do, but people kind of want to have this normal person follower mindset and then achieve these massive unusual things. And you don't achieve massive unusual things by like behaving like a normal follower worker drone type person in the world, right? And I think just like, and that's like boils down to like the most minute things in your life of like, do you kind of sit down in the evening and watch 4 hours of TV because that's what your mum and dad did every evening, instead of like working on a project or reading a book or doing something that like helps you grow in some particular way? And I'm not like promoting burnout or like working every hour of the day, but you don't achieve extraordinary things by being ordinary. And I think the kind of follower mentality of wanting to defer to authority and have experts tell you what to do, that is not how you achieve extraordinary things. And finishing a game, even a bad game, is a relatively extraordinary thing in a world where most people don't make things, most people aren't creative, most people don't have these skills like coding or making art assets. It is an extraordinary thing to do, and you don't achieve that by behaving or thinking in an ordinary way. So that's my spiel after being cognitively melted by the puzzles in Department of Gravity Management. That's my little like, this is what this channel is about, for people who are new or just needed that pep talk. So yeah, go and make stuff, make cool stuff, do what these guys have done, like make a big toolkit of weird fun stuff that's fun to interact with, and then work out how to structure that into a game later, because I think this can do well, and it's just making sure that it doesn't put people off in the first half hour by immediately throwing in the deep end. But yeah, go and be weird, make weird stuff, and I hope to play it at some point. And I'm going to go now. So have a, what day is it? Is it Tuesday? Have a happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining. And I didn't fully explain, but yeah, most of the games that are going to be streamed this month will be from the Patreon. There is a open waiting list on indiegameclinic.com, a form where you can submit your games if you're not a patron, but that's a long waiting list. There's like 300 games in that list. I do occasionally grab games from there and put them in other streams, but it really just depends on whether like one of the channel patrons submits a game that has a theme. And I'm like, someone from the Discord community, one of the patrons might go, I've got a cyberpunk game, please stream it. I'll stream it, and then I'll look into the backlog and find a couple of games that go with it. That's kind of how things generally work. So if you go over to patreon.com/indiegameclinic, there's a free newsletter over there, and this kind of stuff to do with how the channel works and how the streams work is all over there. So you can kind of find out. I did this month's newsletter yesterday. So there's a bunch of stuff over there you can check out. Thanks for joining today. And remember, watch out for gravity. It's everywhere.